Welcome to Eyes on Books, the show where we talk about new books and we actually get to interview the authors from all across the country. I'm your co-host today, Nicole Aloni, along with Charlie Redner.
Hi there.
And today we're going to be discussing All Her Little Secrets by Wanda M. Morris. And a little bit later on in the show, we're also going to have a chance to speak with Wanda, which is awesome. So, a little bit about the book. This is really a fast-paced thriller, which is her debut book. So when you read this, I think you're going to be as impressed as I was with what she's accomplished in her first time out as an author. So this is, what's been described as a twisty mystery about a black lawyer who gets caught in a dangerous conspiracy after the sudden death of her white boss, and who also happens to be her secret lover. So, New York Times bestselling author Karen Slaughter has called this book a powerhouse exploration of race, the legal system, and the crushing pressure of keeping secrets. Slaughter also calls Morris a vibrant new voice on the thriller scene. So, good morning, Charlie. I mean, you and I both read this, and I know
Absolutely.
We loved it. And what did you think of all these comments?
I agree with every one of them. I think this is a very important book because it covers a lot of the isms, the sexism and the racism and ageism even. And she does it so beautifully. As a matter of fact, I have seen an interview with her where she didn't set out to attack these large issues. She just wanted to write a good book, and yet they came through. So
very strongly, yeah.
And my reasoning is I think there's an awful lot of biography in there. Readers like to know where's the truth in your fiction and where are the lies in your nonfiction. And I think there's a lot of truth in this fiction here.
Yeah, I had the same feeling. And of course, the protagonist in the book is a black female attorney, as is Wanda M. Morris.
Right.
And I definitely would stop as I was reading the book, in a certain maybe really intense or emotional passage, and go, I wonder if that really happened to her. I wonder if this is some version of a story that really took place in her life.
That's the exact thing I thought, and I wanted to talk to her about it. You're almost afraid to ask,
Yeah.
There's so many,
there's some bad things happening in this book.
One of the things, the first thing I thought about was all her little secrets. I say, come on, that's a misnomer here.
Oh yeah, we talked about that earlier. These are all really big secrets.
They're big.
I don't think there was a single little secret in there.
You're right.
And what is a little secret, right?
Right.
I don't know. But she really keeps you on the edge of your seat. I mean, it's a very complex whole plot and the way things are revealed and flashbacks and flash forwards.
Exactly.
And mostly it's the secrets, it seems like, that cause you to flip into a flashback or moves the book through time.
Including probably the most important secret, and it's not a secret because it comes up early in the book. Her boss apparently committed suicide, and she is the first one to discover him early in the morning when she goes to work, and she never says a word about it, sneaks off to her own office and plays dumb.
Yeah, and it took me a long ways into the book, like several hundred pages really, maybe, to appreciate at all why she might have done that, because it just seemed crazy.
It does.
Like she's just setting herself up for problems, and she clearly had a very complicated relationship. She was in love, with this man and other feelings too.
Well, that could also be a flashback. We know there was a murder during her childhood or teen years that she knew about, and being fearful, being a young black growing up in the South, maybe afraid just to talk to the authorities about anything.
And that definitely occurred to me because, you and I did have a little chit-chat about all this ahead of time. And, there were so many instances where, I'm reading that she didn't report things, that she didn't go to the authorities, that she didn't look for help, not just the police, but the FBI or whatever, right?
Even a girlfriend. She didn't confide in a girlfriend or close cohort. She didn't talk to anyone about any of those things.
And so, being a young, black woman in the South, you could really understand discomfort with authorities and the police and all of that. But she didn't turn to anyone.
No.
And that seemed
strange.
Well, and hard.
And hard to do. Keep that secret.
And you just felt, at least I did, this was the way because I empathize with her a lot. I've been a woman in business, my whole life.
Sure.
And she made things consistently harder for herself. And I think we've all known people like that, right?
She didn't take the easy way out
of anything.
Ever. No. She bowled forward from the time she was a little girl, 14 years old. Can you imagine? She had an alcoholic mother. We can disclose that.
Yeah.
She had a stepfather that wasn't apparently too kind, and if it wasn't
We'll say no more.
and if it wasn't for a neighbor who became a surrogate mother for her, we don't know what would have happened to that child. And as a matter of fact, as we go through the story, she gets out because she's sent off to a boarding school, and she ends up going to college and getting degrees and everything. When her brother didn't, and that would have been the life she would have had. And he comes into her life, and while she's a corporate attorney and doing well, and you can see the dichotomy of the two lives and how they changed.
Well, I mean, there's that. It could have been similar, but clearly she was spectacularly smart. Probably smarter than her brother. No matter what his educational level. And there's something that just really, intuitively, I thought, I bet you that was Wanda Morris's experience. I bet she was just remarkably smart, and because she has a huge life, she has a huge career now. In addition to being, an author, she's a very powerful, very accomplished attorney. I think she teaches law, and it seems like she was, probably just plucked from situations consistently because she was so smart and worked really hard, right?
Yes.
Like the protagonist here, worked harder than anybody else.
But she certainly collected secrets. I mean, she didn't even tell even her best friends and all that she had a brother. She didn't disclose anything to her friends. She didn't tell them, obviously, that she was having an affair with her boss, and you wouldn't want to promote that, but at least you had a confidant that you might say that to somebody to bounce something off of. She just didn't disclose anything.
I mean, it makes it for a very strong character.
Yes.
But there was points at which it seemed unrealistic to me. I thought, if I was in that much trouble, maybe I wouldn't go to the police. Maybe it would be too scary, but God, I'd have to call one of my best friends or my sister. I mean, I couldn't do it by myself.
That's a good point you make, because the things that did happen, I mean, she goes to her brother's house looking for some documents, and she gets hit over the head and knocked out, doesn't go to the police. The wife of her boss, who she was sleeping with, calls her up and says, come over, I have some paperwork that might interest you, that might help solve this. We know right away that it isn't a suicide, he is murdered. And she doesn't call the police after that, even though the wife says, perhaps you should call the police. And her girlfriends tell her, call the police. She just doesn't do it. She's going to solve this murder mystery all by herself.
And I have to say, it took me a little bit longer into the book to really bond with this character. Mm-hmm. Because she kept doing those things, and I'm sitting there, like when you're screaming at the television set, why are you doing that? Couldn't you just ask somebody?
I know.
And so it took a little longer for me to sort of really develop empathy for her and to try to, understand her character more.
Might have been easier for me because not only am I reading the book, I get the audiobooks, and the actors that they have reading those parts. It pulls you right into the story.
Oh,
I am there. It's like watching a movie without seeing anything. It's just incredible.
Oh, I'm sorry I didn't see that. Maybe I'll listen to the audiobook, afterwards and enjoy it that way.
It's fun to do. Well, I guess we're going to call it quits for a minute while we wait for our guest Wanda to come on screen, and we'll be back shortly.
Fantastic.
Wanda M. Morris, welcome to Eyes on Book. I am so excited meeting you today and talking to you. I loved your book, and I'm just so anxious to talk to you.
Me too. And this is Charlie, and I'm Nicole. And is it okay if we call you Wanda?
Yes, that's fine.
Great. Yeah, we both were just crazy about this book. We've talked about it a lot.
Thank you.
And I guess one of the first questions, and of course, if you just want to tell us things and, forget our questions, great. You're the expert here, really it's your words we're wanting to hear. But what attracted you to the mystery genre for your first novel? I mean, the first book is a hard thing.
Yeah, that's true. For me, I've always loved this genre. I loved, reading, John Grisham and Scott Turow and all those kind of, thriller mysteries.
With lawyers.
So it was,
Like
I
you.
gravitated to it because it was what I love to read.
Fantastic. And how did the idea for this story evolve? Because this is a really complicated story, right? There's layers and layers, and then we go back and we go forward, and then there's more secrets. And how did this
Yeah.
evolve for you?
Gosh, I guess it probably all started back in 2008, and maybe before that. I mean, I've always wanted to write a book, but that always seemed like something very lofty and for somebody else that, I wasn't smart enough to do that. I convinced myself. But I had this character, Elise Littlejohn, rambling around in my head forever. And I always thought, gosh, it would be really interesting to explore what it's like to work in this type of environment. And, what if she got caught in, a dilemma that placed her, in both a moral and a legally ethical, challenging position. And even before I put pen to paper, I had been thinking about this story. Now, the story evolved over the years that it took me to write it, but I think because, that old adage, write what you know.
Right.
And so I kind of new legal environments.
So there we go, and that's what I want to know.
Yeah.
All readers want to know what's the truth in your fiction and what's the lies in your nonfiction. So we're going to learn how much is true.
Yeah.
Elise is an interesting character, and you're an interesting person. So
And you're a black attorney in the South. She's a black female attorney in the South. We have to go like, is she writing about herself?
Well, I haven't killed anyone.
oh, shucks.
So that's not going to be the big reveal on this show. Huh? This is not a true confession. Okay, good.
So, no, and I haven't walked away from any dead bodies recently. So, I think we diverge in that regard. But no, I think that there are some similarities. Of course, our profession that we share, but I think I also share this love for family that Elise had. And I think that some of the scenes, now I always caution people, the book is fiction. The book is
Of
fiction.
course.
But there have been some situations that I've experienced very similar, like the scene where Elise and her girlfriend go out for brunch on a Sunday afternoon and decide to go shopping, and they're racially profiled in a store. Mm-hmm. I've had that happen to me. I've had men dismiss me and in a meeting or try and malign me. So yeah, some of those things I have had.
And that was really
experience
my,
with,
yeah.
but I tried to quote them and, kind of change the names so that the innocent are protected.
So you were hidden. You have so many important issues here. I heard where you started to write this book, you didn't think about writing a book with all these major issues, sexism and racism and ageism even, and it came out, but it comes through very legitimate. I mean, it feels right. These things really happen to people.
Yeah, I did not set out to write a book about, racism and, like you said, sexism and ageism. I set out to write a story about one Black woman. And I think to tell the story of a Black woman in corporate America, you have to touch on those issues. Sure. Because that's what happens in real life.
And you really explicated that so well. I mean, it became such a clear part of the story, this insight into what it's like to be a female Black attorney in the South in a large corporate firm. It felt like I was getting a window into this world that I wouldn't have had, I wouldn't have known any other way. I mean, I really felt like I learned
thank you.
things. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. That's high praise, because I think most authors want to write books that feel authentic and the story feels organic. And so thank you very much.
And I was also really curious about, there was so much rich material that was insightful, introspective, complex. Was there one, by the time you finished with this rich book, which is now looking at racism and sexism and all that, was there one sort of predominant learning that you wanted people to walk away from this book with? If they just learned one thing, because you were teaching a lot while you were entertaining.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, that's a great question. I think if there were one thing that I want people to take away from this book is to do a little self-reflection and ask yourself, am I part of the problem or am I contributing to the solution? I think a lot of times, and I think that this is a line from the book. I think Elise says it towards the end, where she says everybody kind of brings their own baggage into the workplace. And I hope that people will sit down and reflect, like, what baggage am I bringing in and what biases am I bringing into the workplace? And I hope people have a real discussion, a very civil and intelligent discussion about what it means to be open and inclusive, not only in the workplace, but just going about your everyday life. Am I part of the problem or am I part of the solution?
There's one scene in the book, and she says to herself, I'm the only one in the room. And you know what she means. She's the only black, she's the only woman, she's the only corporate person who's up in this high, 20th floor with all these executives. And she feels that. And I felt that. And I listened to the audiobook as well as reading it. And those actors, I was there and I felt that.
Yeah, the audiobook narrator is excellent. Susie Hawk, she's an actress on the West Coast out of LA, and she was just absolutely excellent. But yeah, I think, I've been told that that's one of the things that people like so much about the book is that they can relate to it. It resonates because they've had those moments where they walked into a room and they were the only one. They were, the other, so to speak.
I have a question, though, that's asked in the book that isn't answered, but maybe you know the answer. Little John does not sound like, she's asked that question, obviously, where did your name come from? But where did the author come up with that name and why?
You know what? It's interesting. I didn't do a lot of research around that. I'm very intentional about names for my characters.
Of course you are.
And I wanted a name that was unusual in the way that when you immediately heard it, you couldn't pinpoint exactly where it came from. Like there's some names that people associate with certain races.
Right.
Yes, sure.
And so I didn't want a name like that. I wanted a name that, somebody would ask her, that's an unusual name. Where did that name come from? Now, I believe Little John is, if I'm not mistaken, it might be either Native American,
Cherokee,
or
maybe.
Yeah, but I am not sure. I didn't research the name, but I picked a name that intentionally people would not immediately draw conclusions about.
You did good there. You did real good there.
And you were saying, the different things that have made the book popular, and the book is not just being popular, you're winning awards left and right. Would you mind sort of sharing with us?
Yeah, including the left one. That was a new one to me.
The lefty?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it right there.
It is? Oh, far. Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah. The Left Coast Crime Conference is a conglomerate of mystery writers that are all kind of, their organizations are based kind of like left of the Mississippi River. And they have a conference every year, and they award they hand out several awards for, best book, historical. And so they also award for best debut. And then I also won Georgia Author of the Year. It's been nominated for a few things, but I've lost some. I won some, I've lost some.
The library reads the November 2021. I mean, that one really tickled you, didn't it?
Oh my gosh, that's the one I'm most proud of, because that one is awarded by librarians across the country. And I mean, think about it. Librarians read all the books. Okay. So if they read my book and they say, oh, we like this, and not only do we like it, we think it's the number one pick, that was very high praise for me.
No kidding. Wow. And I've got to ask, what books are you reading right now?
Oh, that's a great question. I should have.
Did it.
Oh, here it is. I just finished this book. It's called Time's Undoing, and it's by Cheryl Head. And it's a wonderful, wonderful book. It doesn't come out, unfortunately, until February. But you should put this on your TBR, your to be read stacks, because it is a novel that's loosely based on something that actually happened in her family. Her great-grandfather was killed by the Birmingham, Alabama police. And she sets the story up with a young reporter who decides to research what happened, what's the story behind his murder by the police, and relates that to the Black Lives Matter movement. Very interesting read.
Oh, wow.
Very, very.
Super interesting. Did you have something you wanted to?
Well, I just want to know, you're working on another book, or you've got one coming out sooner than we're going to end this show, I think. What's the title and what's it about?
Sure. So my next book, I think you might be able to see it over my left, your right shoulder, but it's Anywhere You Run. And this one comes out October 25th. And it is the story, I like to describe it as a coming of age story of two young Black women growing up in the Jim Crow South of Mississippi. And the book opens with a kind of a imagining of the murder of three civil rights activists, James Chaney, Andrew Goodman,
William Bradford Huey. That book changed my life.
Right,
let me tell
exactly.
You. It really did.
And so against that backdrop, Violet Richards is brutally attacked, but she kills her attacker. And she knows she won't be able to find justice in Jim Crow South, so she takes off running. And through a series of twists and turns, because I like twisty books, she winds up in a small rural town in Georgia. And back home, her older sister is in a bit of trouble too, because it's the 1960s and she finds herself pregnant and unmarried. And she decides to take off running when the police come to her door looking for her sister. But what the two women don't realize is that there's someone from back in Jackson who knows about the murder and has some dark secrets of his own and a really unique motive for finding the women.
Sounds like another real twister here.
Cat and mouse chase.
You like to put conflict in there, don't you? And put people in a difficult place where they can't get out, but somehow they do.
And is there like another iteration of all her little secrets? Is it, going to be on television or?
Oh gosh, from your lips to God's ear.
Okay, this is direct.
Yeah.
I have a direct, sure.
We won't talk to anyone.
It just seems like.
That would be wonderful.
It just seems very visual. It seems like it would be a piece that would translate really well into the screen.
Thank you.
Well, we'll see.
Thank you.
Did you sit down? I think the first book took you like 7 years. You put it away for 7 years, and you actually wrote longhand, and then you probably had to type it, and nobody's going to read an untyped manuscript, right? I mean, those kids today can't read that cursor, so you would have to type it out. But why did the second book come so fast? Did you learn so much about writing the first time?
Yeah, I think what happened with that first book is I was learning how to write a book because All Her Little Secrets is my very first book I've ever written. Like, I haven't written some and put them in a drawer somewhere.
Right.
It was my very first book. And so I just kept pounding at it. And like I said, then I convinced myself I wasn't very good at it. So I put it away for 7 years and then came back to it. But I was still in the process of learning because I had to learn about things like pacing and characterization and dialogue.
And each person
by the
has
time,
to speak
what's
differently.
that?
Yeah. Each person has to speak differently.
Yeah, right. So by the time it was time to write the second book, I kind of had that knowledge. And so I was kind of armed with the tools, but it was just a matter of coming up with the right story and the right character.
I'd imagine that you'd also really developed a lot of confidence in yourself, right? Once you write something, right, and it really works, then you can, I'm sorry, I'm also a life coach, okay? So, but you know, once you figure out, well, if I thought it was good, it is good, right? I don't have to keep doubting myself. I thought this was a good chapter or whatever, and it turns out, if I like it, it's good, and millions of other people will buy it, right? So then you can...
Yeah.
You know what? I wish that were true, Nicole, but it's not.
We're going to have to call it quits here soon, Wanda, but I just thoroughly enjoyed meeting you today and talking to you and reading your book. You are a wonderful, wonderful writer, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise.
and ditto, and I've already recommended this book to so many friends. I really, and I did learn things. And I did learn, I believe, exactly what you were aiming at. So thank you.
Thank you.
And good luck with the next book.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you both for having me.
You bet.
Oh, it was a joy.
Bye, Wanda.
And thank all you viewers out there. I hope you enjoyed this show as much as we enjoyed bringing it to you. That Wanda Morris, she is really something. And you watch us here on Channel 6 every month, every Monday at 9:30. You'll find us. Look us up. Stay tuned. Thank you very much. Charlie Redner signing off.
Nicole Aloni signing off. See you again.
We thank you for tuning in to Eyes on Books. And if you have any books that you think might make an interesting discussion or authors who are good speakers, we'd love to hear your suggestions. Contact us at eyesonbooks@yahoo.com and keep watching.